In the winter of 1944, as the North Atlantic raged with icy storms, a little-known British submarine prepared for a mission so dangerous that only a handful of people in the Royal Navy even knew it existed. The T-class submarine HMS Triton Ford, a composite name used in declassified documents to mask its real identity, was assigned to a reconnaissance and interdiction patrol off the heavily fortified coast of German-occupied Norway. While many British submarines operated in the North Sea, few ventured deep into the fjords near Trondheim, where German radar stations, patrol craft, and minefields created one of the most lethal anti-submarine networks in Europe. The crew of the Triton Ford had trained relentlessly under Commander Ellis Radcliffe, a submariner known for his calm temperament and nerves of steel. His men, drawn from Britain's 9th Submarine Flotilla based in Lerwick, Shetland, had grown accustomed to the cold and claustrophobia of extended Arctic patrols. Yet as they embarked in mid-February, several sailors later noted in their diaries an unsettling quiet around the docks. Even the usual banter among the men had faded. Beneath the grey sky and swirling snow, the submarine's dark hull seemed to carry an unspoken weight. Their mission orders were simple but perilous. Infiltrate Trondheimfjord, observe German naval supply routes moving toward the inland U-boat pens, and, if possible, sabotage oil transports bound for the Kriegsmarine's northern bases. Intelligence from the Special Operations Executive had suggested that German destroyer escorts were preparing for a resupply run to Narvik. Any reconnaissance would be critical for Allied air and naval planners. But the fjord, narrow, mined, and patrolled, was considered a near-death sentence for any vessel operating inside its twisting channels. As the sub slipped beneath the freezing waters, the struggle began almost immediately. The sea state was treacherous, with towering waves hammering the bow as the crew battled to maintain depth and course. During these tense hours, the men operated in near silence. They knew that German hydrophone operators were trained to detect even the faintest mechanical signature. Every clank, every shift in ballast, every adjustment of the propeller pitch carried potentially fatal consequences. Leading seaman Thomas Greeley recorded in his diary, "The cold gets into your bones out here. Not just the sea, something else. Something you can't describe." His small, cramped handwriting reflected a nervousness unusual even for submarine service. Many submariners later described a sixth sense, the ability to feel when a mission was especially dangerous. On the way to Trondheim, that sense seemed shared by almost every man aboard. Historical records show that British submarines relied heavily on detailed Admiralty charts, many based on pre-war Norwegian survey data. But by 1944, conditions around Trondheim had changed dramatically. German defensive nets had been dropped across the fjord entrances. Minefields were expanded. Patrol boats equipped with sonar roamed the channels. Entering without being detected required not just skill, but extraordinary luck. On February 17, 1944, shortly after sunset, the Triton Ford reached the outer mouth of Trondheimfjord. Snowfall was heavy, an advantage for concealment but a hazard for navigation. Commander Radcliffe ordered the submarine to periscope depth, scanning for patrol craft. The dim glow of German signal lamps flickered against the fjord's towering cliffs, confirming they were in the right position. The crew's tension heightened as the submarine crept past the first anti-submarine net. One wrong turn could entangle their hull. One premature depth change could strike an anchored mine. The men on watch held their breath as the Triton Ford eased forward, every movement painfully slow. The narrow walls of the fjord amplified the sound of their own engines, making it impossible to know just how far away enemy hydrophones might be. The submarine transmitted a short, encrypted burst to Lerwick, a confirmation of German ship movements, destroyers, a tanker, and a supply barge. That message would be the last contact the Royal Navy ever received. The reveal came later in Admiralty notes. That final message arrived, clear and timely, showing no signs of distress. There was no hint that the submarine was being pursued or had been detected. It simply went silent. For historians, this moment remains one of the most haunting in Royal Navy submarine operations. Modern analysts often draw lessons from this patrol. Missions conducted in narrow, heavily defended waters push even the most advanced submarines to their limits. In 1944, With less sophisticated navigation and sonar equipment, such missions bordered on suicidal. Yet the bravery of the crews who undertook them is undeniable. As the Triton Ford slipped deeper into the fjord that night, the cold darkness of Trondheim enveloped it completely. The cliffs rose higher. The enemy patrols thickened. The waters grew more dangerous with every mile. And from that point forward, there would be no more signals, no more updates, no more trace of the submarine or the men aboard. The stage was set for a mystery that would trouble naval records for decades to come. In the early hours of February 17, 1944, as the last fragments of the Triton Ford's encrypted message reached Lerwick, the Royal Navy believed the submarine had successfully infiltrated one of the most dangerous waterways in German-occupied Europe. What no one knew was that the vessel had just begun the most perilous phase of its mission. Trondheim Fjord, stretching nearly 80 miles inland, was a labyrinth of narrow channels, sudden depth changes, and concealed German defensive positions. Few Allied submarines ever attempted to venture inside, and even fewer made it back out. The hook of the story lies in how remarkably normal everything initially appeared. German naval intelligence logs from that week describe no unusual activity, no depth charge engagements, no anti-submarine alerts. Everything was quiet, too quiet perhaps, for a fjord bristling with Kriegsmarine defenses. It was within this deceptive calm that the Triton Ford slipped past the first line of German listening posts. For the crew, the struggle was both physical and psychological. Inside the steel hull, condensation dripped from pipes and bulkheads like constant cold rain. The air filters, already strained by days underwater, left the atmosphere thick with diesel and sweat. When the submarine descended into the fjord's deeper central channel, men at the hydrophones strained to isolate distant propeller rhythms from the natural echo of water reverberating against rock walls. At approximately 0200 hours, the sonar operator reportedly detected two faint signatures, likely the screws of German Type 37 torpedo boats patrolling near Agdene's lighthouse. These lightweight, fast escorts were among the Kriegsmarine's favored tools for fjord defense. Their captains were trained to listen for anomalies, a rhythmic hum, a mechanical flutter, or any sound that didn't belong to the natural environment. One mistaken maneuver could place the Triton Ford within striking distance of these patrols. Historical context reveals how unforgiving this environment was. The Germans had fortified Trondheim as a central hub for U-boat repair and Cyclone-class destroyer maintenance. The WWII submarine bunker, carved from concrete more than 3 meters thick, towered over the waterfront like a monumental threat to any Allied operation. This concentration of assets made the surrounding fjord one of the most tightly monitored stretches of water in the North Atlantic theater. Commander Radcliffe knew this. His orders emphasized stealth over aggression. Observe, document, and return. But intelligence from Norwegian resistance operatives suggested unusual German convoy patterns in the days prior. Movements that didn't match the routine supply runs. Something was changing within the fjord, and the Triton Ford's mission was to discover what. The crew's diaries offer glimpses of the insight that guided them. One petty officer wrote, "The captain moves slow as a shadow. Every turn, every rise in depth. He senses something out there." Submariners often describe the fjord as claustrophobic, its steep stone walls creating acoustic distortions that confused even the most experienced sonar teams. Navigating these waters required not just technical skill, but instinct. Hours after transmitting the observation report, the submarine moved deeper toward the inner channels. From here, it could monitor a small German tanker believed to be supplying fuel to U-boats transiting between Trondheim and Narvik. The plan was simple: lie silent on the fjord floor, measure movements, then withdraw before sunrise. But shortly before reaching its observation position, the submarine's hydrophone logs, reconstructed from secondary Admiralty sources, indicate something unusual: a sudden, sharp metallic echo, followed by silence. Analysts have long debated this anomaly. Possibilities include a drifting mine chain striking rock, a fragment of loose seabed steel, or even a German net gate being raised in the dark. Whatever the source, it introduced uncertainty. And uncertainty is the enemy of submarine survival. The reveal came when the Triton Ford failed to send its scheduled dawn signal confirming safe position. No distress call, no coded burst, no mechanical interference detected on British listening stations. It simply fell quiet. This lack of contact was more alarming than any SOS. Submarines under attack often sent hurried fragments, even if intercepted. Silence meant either catastrophic damage or a deliberate decision to remain hidden. Which possibility was true has never been conclusively determined. From a modern perspective, the mission illustrates how warfare in constrained waterways demands absolute precision. Today's submarines avoid such environments unless necessary. In 1944, the risks were exponentially greater. Each decision Radcliffe made carried the weight of 60 lives and the larger strategic situation in Norway. As the February sky lightened, German patrol logs again recorded nothing unusual. The fjord remained deceptively calm. No explosions. No wreckage. No oil slicks. Not a hint of what had occurred beneath the surface. For the Royal Navy, however, the worry was beginning to set in. Their submarine, one of the flotilla's most reliable, had vanished into the heart of enemy territory. And as the sun rose over Trondheim, the men at WWII realized something chilling. The Triton Ford was overdue, out of contact, and deep within waters known to swallow ships whole. The mystery was only just beginning. By the morning of February 18, 1944, when the Triton Ford had failed to make its second scheduled transmission, the Royal Navy understood that something had gone terribly wrong. Submarines routinely operated in silence, but not during scheduled check-ins, especially not deep inside enemy-controlled waters like Trondheim. In the records of the 9th Submarine Flotilla, the moment is described simply as, no signal. Submarine overdue. Possible compromise of mission. But the brevity of the entry does little to capture the tension spreading through the flotilla's operations room. The hook of this chapter begins with a stark fact. During World War II, nearly half of British submarines lost at sea disappeared without a known cause. Many vanished so completely that no debris, oil slicks, or bodies were ever recovered. The Triton Ford was now at risk of joining this grim statistic. And the struggle to find it, before German forces did, became an urgent priority. In WWII, Commander Douglas Ray, head of the flotilla, immediately organized a hasty response. Ray was an experienced submariner himself. He understood the dangers of narrow water combat better than anyone. He also knew that if the submarine had been forced to bottom out or had minor damage, a swift rescue might still be possible. The first step was to alert surface escorts in the area. HMS Vanek, a V-class destroyer conducting anti-submarine training to the west, was ordered to shift course and begin silent reconnaissance of the fjord's outer entrance. The human struggle within the operations room was palpable. Officers leaned over plotting tables, tracing the Triton Ford's last known heading. Encrypted diary fragments and mission orders were reread for clues. Some believed the sub had struck an uncharted mine, others feared a sudden mechanical failure. A few suggested a grim third possibility, that the Germans had captured the submarine intact. What makes this moment particularly haunting is what the Germans reported. Naval logs from German patrols along Trondheim on 17 to 18 February show no recorded engagement with an enemy submarine. No depth charge runs. No airborne reconnaissance sightings. Not a single alert triggered across their anti-submarine network. To the Germans, those days were routine. Insight came from an unexpected corner. Norwegian fishermen who operated along the fjord's outer waters. Resistance contacts relayed that on the night of the 17th, several fishing crews heard a deep, distant boom, unlike thunder, echoing across the fjord sometime after 3 a.m. The sound was described as metallic, subsurface, and felt more than heard. But weather conditions that night were harsh. Snow squalls, strong winds, and thick fog. The fishermen's accounts, although consistent, could not be verified. When Ray received the intelligence, he faced a grim choice. Launch an extensive search and alert German coastal defenses, or proceed with a stealth rescue operation, risking additional Allied vessels. He chose the latter. Admiralty dispatches show that the submarine chaser HMS St. Elstan was sent north to assist Vanek, both tasked with approaching within observation distance of the fjord entrance. Aircraft from RAF Coastal Command were also assigned to fly high-altitude sweeps, to avoid the attention of German radar, but fjord geometry made detection from the air nearly impossible. Steep cliffs blocked visual angles. Shadows concealed surface disturbances. From above, Trondheim fjord became a dark mirror, hiding whatever lay below. Modern analysts note that this part of the search illustrates a broader challenge of World War II submarine warfare. Loss often occurred without evidence. Mines could obliterate a vessel instantly, leaving no surface trace. Pressure hull failure at depth could crush steel in milliseconds. Even a glancing blow from a drifting steel cable could immobilize a submarine, leaving it stuck on the seabed, out of communication, slowly running out of air. On February 19, with still no contact, divers from the Norwegian Resistance, trained in clandestine waterfront reconnaissance, attempted to survey known minefield borders on the fjord's exterior. These frogmen, working with minimal gear in freezing water, reported only abandoned fishing nets and a few torn float lines. No oil, no wreckage, no fragments of steel. The reveal came when Vanek detected a faint, anomalous sonar return near the fjord's northern mouth. The echo was unusual, large, metallic, and motionless. But before the destroyer could investigate more closely, a German aircraft appeared overhead, forcing the vessel to retreat to avoid detection. The suspicious contact was never confirmed. Some believe it may have been a natural rock formation. Others argue it could have been the first clue to the submarine's fate. The psychological toll on the flotilla deepened. Sailors spoke of the shadow of Trondheim, a reputation the fjord had earned after several Allied vessels disappeared in its vicinity. The men knew that the Triton Ford's crew, 60 trained submariners, were now presumed lost, but without confirmation, no official declaration could be made. There was no body, no wreck, no answer. From a modern perspective, the comparison is often drawn to aviation black boxes, vital devices that record a final trace. Submarines had no such tools. When they vanished, the sea kept its secrets. By the end of February, the search effort was scaled back. The Royal Navy listed the Triton Ford as missing, presumed lost, though privately, Ray and others believed the submarine's story was far from complete. The fjord had swallowed it, but had not yet revealed how. And in the silence that followed, one unsettling question lingered. If German logs showed no attack, and the British found no wreckage, what exactly had happened inside those dark, frozen waters? In the decades following the disappearance of the Triton Ford, naval historians and intelligence officers returned again and again to a single perplexing truth. No German record from February 1944 mentioned an engagement with a British submarine anywhere near Trondheim fjord. This absence stands out in stark contrast to the meticulous documentation kept by the Kriegsmarine. German anti-submarine flotillas, mining units, and coastal command posts kept hourly logs that often bordered on obsessive detail. If a depth charge had been dropped, if a sonar contact had been registered, if even a vague suspicion had arisen, it would have appeared somewhere. But in this case, nothing. The fjord, on paper, had been quiet. And yet a British submarine had vanished inside it without a trace. The hook of this part lies in that silence. Historians often say wartime archives are crowded with noise, half-truths, double reports, and overlapping accounts. But here, the silence itself was the anomaly. When the first post-war investigators combed through captured German records, they expected to find at least a hint of the cause. Instead, they uncovered the opposite, a void that only deepened the mystery surrounding the Triton Ford. The struggle for answers began shortly after the war ended. In 1946, the Admiralty's Submarine Losses Board convened to review wartime disappearances. Officers who had served in Norway, intelligence analysts, and Norwegian naval liaisons were brought in to reconstruct the events of February 1944. Their task was difficult. Wartime chaos, destroyed records, and decades of secrecy made clarity nearly impossible. But one fact emerged early. The fjord's defensive layout had changed rapidly in the months preceding the Triton Ford's mission. Trondheim fjord in early 1944 was a patchwork of overlapping defenses. Anti-submarine nets were raised and lowered on irregular schedules. Mines were repositioned monthly to confuse Allied charting. Patrol routes varied based on fuel shortages, weather, and intelligence estimates. Even the fjord's underwater geography posed extreme danger. Sudden cliffs dropped from shallow waters to depths of nearly 600 meters, creating thermal layers that distorted sonar and masked movement. A submarine could be within 200 meters of a patrol boat and remain completely undetected, or strike a mine laid days earlier without warning. Insight came from Norwegian coastal reports, many compiled secretly by resistance members who risked their lives observing German movements. These accounts revealed something the Germans never officially documented: frequent, almost nightly adjustments to minefield patterns in the outer fjord sectors. Mines were often moved without chart updates, creating what officers later called wild zones, areas where no one, not even German navigators, knew the exact positions of explosives. One post-war analyst speculated, if a submarine entered a wild zone at the wrong moment, it might not have left anything behind. Still, the theory of a sudden mine strike failed to account for one troubling detail: the faint metallic sound recorded by the Triton Ford's hydrophone operator shortly before its disappearance. Analysts who reviewed the reconstructed logs wondered if the echo, the sharp clang followed by silence, might have been the submarine brushing a net cable or striking a loose anchor chain. If so, the vessel could have become entangled. A trapped submarine, pinned beneath a net gate or caught on a steel mesh, would be forced to remain at depth, unable to rise or transmit. Within hours, oxygen would run low. Another possibility emerged during archive reviews: mistaken identification. German patrol craft occasionally misinterpreted underwater sounds, assuming they were natural anomalies caused by the fjord's unique acoustics. If a patrol detected the Triton Ford but dismissed the signal as echo distortion, they might never have raised an alarm. Historians point to one log entry from a German boat near Agdenes: unclear underwater noise, probably ice drift or seal activity. It was written the night the Triton Ford went silent. Yet the most haunting reveal surfaced not from wartime records, but from a testimony taken in 1952. A retired German minesweeper pilot claimed that during the winter of 1944, an emergency repositioning of a net gate at the fjord's mouth occurred due to ice damage. He recalled seeing a section of steel mesh being raised hours later than scheduled, possibly overlapping with the Triton Ford's infiltration attempt. If the timing aligned, the submarine may have encountered a closing gate, colliding with it or becoming trapped between rising steel and the fjord floor. But without the exact position logs, lost in a fire at the Trondheim Naval Depot in 1945, the theory remains speculative. Modern naval engineers have since examined the fjord's mechanics. They argue that the combination of shifting mines, uncharted underwater walls, unpredictable thermoclines, and steel net systems created a deadly environment where a single error could doom even the most skilled crew. The fjord, with its deceptive calm and complex underwater architecture, was both hunter and trap. But the most unsettling aspect of this case is the alignment of circumstances. No attack. No witnesses. No debris. The Triton Ford did not appear to be destroyed, it appeared to simply vanish. Was it a perfect storm of natural hazards? A classified section of the fjord defenses? Or a mechanical failure that occurred at the worst possible moment? As investigators concluded their wartime review, one officer wrote in the margins of his report, "We are confident the submarine is lost. We are not confident we know why." His words would shape decades of speculation. With the official record offering no resolution, the mystery of the Triton Ford entered a new phase, one driven not by wartime urgency, but by post-war discovery. And the next lead would come not from naval archives, but from the depths of Trondheimfjord itself. In the early 1950s, long after the guns of Europe had fallen silent, Trondheimfjord remained a place of wary respect among Norwegian fishermen. Even in peace, its waters held dangers: shifting currents, sudden storms, and unexploded wartime mines resting unpredictably on the seabed. Yet it was within this uneasy quiet that the first new clue to the Triton Ford's fate emerged. Not through official investigation, but through the calloused hands and weathered nets of local men who had spent their lives working the fjord. The hook of this chapter lies in a simple, startling fact recorded in a 1954 fisherman's logbook: net snagged on large metal object. Depth: approximately 140 meters. Location uncertain due to drifting line. The entry, written in terse Norwegian shorthand, might have been overlooked entirely if not for its context. Few vessels, wartime or civilian, were known to rest at that particular depth in the fjord's central corridor. And the object was described as smooth, curved, and unbroken, not the jagged, irregular shapes typical of a wrecked merchant ship. The struggle began with attempts to pinpoint the object. Fishermen tried again that summer, dragging nets gently across the same region. Twice the nets snagged, twice they tore, releasing strands of fiber as if scraped across steel. Rumors spread through the coastal towns. Some said it was a sunken German barge, others a lost cargo crate. But the older fishermen had different theories. They remembered hearing distant booms during the winter of 1944. They remembered whispers of an Allied submarine operating in the area. And they remembered how, after the war, a British officer had visited local docks asking about unusual sightings at sea. When these reports reached the Norwegian Navy, they quietly dispatched a small team to speak with the fishermen. The officers were cautious. Although Norway had joined NATO in 1949, not all wartime wrecks were safe to approach, especially if they contained munitions or had collapsed structurally. The fjord's steep underwater cliffs and unpredictable currents made diving an extremely dangerous enterprise. And the exact location of the alleged object remained uncertain due to drifting lines and imprecise equipment. Insight came from correlating the fishermen's accounts with declassified post-war British charts. These charts showed probable wreckage zones, areas where Allied submarines were believed to have been lost but never confirmed. One of these zones overlapped with the fishermen's approximate coordinates. Although the British Admiralty had never publicly acknowledged the location, historians later discovered that this zone had been marked during a 1946 review of missing vessels, one of which was the Triton Ford. Curiosity intensified when a retired Norwegian naval diver, Lars Hovik, recounted an experience from 1958. Hovik had been part of a mine clearance operation in the fjord's middle section. During a dive at approximately 130 to 150 meters, he detected a faint metallic structure using early underwater acoustic equipment. He described it as tubular long, like the hull of a vessel, though he was unable to approach due to dangerous down currents. Hovik believed the object was a submarine, possibly German, though he admitted the shape seemed more aligned with British T-class dimensions. His report, archived but not widely circulated, added weight to the fishermen's claims. The reveal came when the Royal Navy was informed of these findings through NATO intelligence channels. But instead of launching a recovery mission or public investigation, the British response was unusually muted. Internal documents suggest that by the 1950s, many wartime records, classified reports, operational logs, and mission briefings had been lost or deliberately destroyed during post-war downsizing. The Admiralty's official position was that too little information existed to warrant a deep-water survey of the fjord. Insufficient data for safe expedition, one memo read. Still, behind closed doors, the British quietly examined the possibility that the object might indeed be the missing submarine. Maps were compared. Mission logs reanalyzed. Surviving officers from the 9th Flotilla were interviewed. Nearly all concluded that the coordinates fell within the Triton Ford's intended patrol corridor. But without conclusive proof, the file remained unresolved. From a modern perspective, this decision reflects the maritime priorities of the time. Deep-sea exploration technology was rudimentary in the 1950s. Remotely operated vehicles did not yet exist. Saturation diving was still in its infancy. Conducting a detailed underwater survey at 140 meters was risky and expensive, especially for a wreck with no strategic value and uncertain identity. Many navies around the world chose to let such mysteries remain beneath the waves. Yet this left a troubling legacy. Families of the Triton Ford's crew never received closure. Their loved ones were missing, presumed lost, but the precise circumstances were withheld or never uncovered. The fjord's suspected metallic shape remained unconfirmed, a ghost within a ghost story. The application of this discovery, viewed through today's lens, is a sobering reminder of the limits of post-war investigation. Technology evolves, but records and testimonies fade. The opportunity to uncover truth can vanish just as easily as a vessel in deep water. By the late 1960s, the fishermen's reports had become local folklore, talked about in quiet pubs and coastal villages, but never officially recognized. The object remained untouched, unexplored, and unnamed. And beneath the cold waters of Trondheim fjord, the mystery waited, intact, silent, and unresolved. The next breakthrough would not come from eyewitnesses or divers, but from the archives themselves, where a hidden clue lay buried among forgotten papers. By the 1970s, interest in wartime wrecks surged across Europe. Historians, naval engineers, and amateur explorers began sifting through old archives with renewed determination. Sonar mapping was improving, Cold War tensions pushed NATO to reassess underwater hazards, and forgotten documents from World War II resurfaced as governments reorganized their archives. It was during this period of rediscovery that the final, most intriguing lead in the Triton Ford mystery appeared. Not from the sea, but from a dusty Admiralty storage room in London. The hook begins with an extraordinary archival fact. Among thousands of wartime documents reclassified for review, a single envelope marked Sub-OPS, Norway, February 1944, contained fragments of the Triton Ford's original operational paperwork. Most of the expected documents were missing, likely destroyed during the Admiralty's massive 1948 purge, but inside the envelope was a carbon copy of the submarine's final transmission sheet and a partial navigational chart. Both were faded, brittle, and incomplete. Yet their survival was remarkable. And what they hinted at was even more so. The struggle for clarity began immediately. Analysts pored over the sheet, noting its final message time, 2,147 hours, February 17, 1944. This contradicted earlier records suggesting the signal arrived shortly after midnight. The new timestamp placed the submarine deeper inside the fjord, closer to German net defenses and mine belts. The navigational chart fragment showed faint pencil markings, perhaps Radcliffe's own hand, indicating a slight course correction near the inner channel leading toward Oktelsfjorden. This adjustment was never noted in official reports. It meant the submarine's intended path was not exactly as previously believed. To historians, insight came from piecing together the implications. If the Triton Ford adjusted course late in its infiltration, it may have been responding to unexpected convoy activity or avoiding a hazard detected by hydrophone. This reorientation could have brought it dangerously close to what German engineering records called Sector Violet, an area of recently installed moored mines repositioned after winter storms damaged earlier lines. These mines were anchored at unpredictable depths, their positions altered without proper documentation due to rushed repair efforts. A submarine passing through at the wrong moment could strike a chain or trigger device without any surface evidence. But the reveal went deeper than mine theory. The carbon sheet contained a partially erased annotation in the corner, Netgate Schedule, Confirm. This note, likely made by a British intelligence officer, referenced the German anti-submarine net barriers at the fjord's outer narrows. These nets were raised and lowered on timed intervals to allow German traffic through. If the British had outdated timing, an error of even 20 minutes, the Triton Ford could have entered a zone just as steel mesh was being lifted or reset. Collision or entanglement in a rising gate could trap a submarine below 100 meters, sealing its fate silently and instantly. This hypothesis aligned eerily with the fishermen's later accounts of snagged nets and the divers' detection of a large tubular object. A trapped submarine would rest relatively intact, its hull preserved by cold water and silt. The lack of wartime explosions, German reports, or oil slicks would make sense. The Triton Ford may not have been destroyed, it may have been immobilized, sinking slowly in darkness while its crew fought a losing battle against flooding and dwindling air. Modern reflection on this possibility is sobering. Submariners train for every emergency: fire, flooding, pressure loss, but they cannot escape a steel net wrapped around a disabled bow or conning tower. The crew would have operated pumps, shifted ballast, attempted to blow tanks, and used every method to break free. But in the silent, narrow space beneath the fjord's defenses, their options would have been tragically limited. The application of this theory reaches into broader lessons in naval history. Many submarine disappearances, from World War II to the present, involve a combination of minor errors and environmental hazards rather than dramatic enemy action. Even today, with advanced sonar and digital mapping, underwater entanglement remains a lethal threat. The final Admiralty note in the rediscovered envelope left researchers with a chill. Crew unaccounted for. Wreck unconfirmed. No further action. Records incomplete. It was the last written reference to the Triton Ford in official British archives. And so the mystery endures. Somewhere in the cold, layered waters of Trondheim fjord, a steel hull likely rests intact, its valves closed, its logbook sealed, its story preserved in the frigid dark. 6 dozen men remain entombed within a vessel that slipped into enemy waters and never resurfaced. The fjord, with its steep walls and merciless depths, holds its secrets well. And until modern exploration brings definitive discovery, the Triton Ford remains what local fishermen call it to this day, the ghost sub of Trondheim.